Hello, welcome. My name is Julie Souza. I lead sports for AWS, and I am joined here by Michael Raimondo, VP of Broadcast Technology for the PGA Tour. We're just going to have a conversation, and we're going to talk a little bit about PGA Tour and its production and fan engagement journey, and we're going to start at the beginning. So, Michael, where did this all start? Where did you guys start your transformation and your journey to the cloud? And I think that starts with ma'am. Let's kick it off.
Yeah, so thanks for having me here. So, the MAM, what we ended up doing, if you guys don't know, for our MAM side of things, we have about 200,000 video assets, about 180,000 hours worth of content. There's 13 million log entries that we have. And when I say log entry, that's pretty much a shot or an interview, that type of stuff. And so back in 2021, we started the journey of actually pushing all of that content into AWS. Previously, we had that on-prem in our facility in St. Augustine, Florida. It was LTOs, it was a lot of servers, there was a lot of equipment that needed for that. We pushed everything up into AWS, and part of the benefit to it is, besides having some redundancy that we had there, but when somebody would request footage, so one of our producers would request footage, it would go to our LTO tape library and grab it and move it, and everyone thought it was cool because there was a robot moving your footage around and everything. But it would also create a queue, and that queue could be somebody could request 50 clips, another person would request 20 clips, another person would request 80 clips, and that queue would take a while to retrieve everything. And so once we pushed everything up in AWS, we've never seen that queue ever again. It's always there. But it also, what helped us is it leveraged the ability to use Transcribe and other tools that are in AWS. So every single interview that we have now runs through Transcribe. Every single telecast that we have runs through Transcribe. So our users now have the ability to go ahead and go into our asset management tool and search by the spoken word as well, which we had not had in the past before. So it's been a huge transformation for our team. We've had now people that log in from our Japanese office. We have people log in when they're in our London office from anywhere in the world that will go into our system now with the ability, since it's in AWS, that they can access it anywhere in the world.
Awesome. So then that gets us to the next step in this journey a little bit. And this was an audacious thing, and I love it so much. It's very aptly titled Every Shot Live, right? Which is the PGA Tour kept capturing every shot live from the Players Championship. And so,
Sure.
So I want to talk a little bit about what some of the driving forces were with that, were behind that. Also, I know you talk about the statistics of what was actually aired before and now what you can air in terms of volume of shots. Yeah. And then let's talk about the fan engagement, the personalization, the globalization impacts of Every Shot Live too.
It's a lot there. Yep.
I know.
So, for those of you who are not aware, so what Every Shot Live is, it typically, if you go back 10 years for a PGA Tour broadcast, we were airing about 3% of all golf shots. That's what was there we usually are on air from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock every single Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. What we ended up doing when we came on live with our ESPN app that we have, our PGA Tour Live is what we call it, we were about 10% of all golf shots. When we did our last race deal with ESPN, we were up to about 28% of all golf shots. What we tried to do, what we ended up doing in 2020 was, can we capture every single shot? And so at Players Championship, we actually went and did that. What we do now is, our first year we did it, we did not have our deal with AWS. We brought a lot of servers, a lot of equipment. It took us about 3.5 days worth of setup time in order to get everything connected. We have over 120 cameras that were on site. That year we were bringing in just over 80 of them for this production. And what we did back then was we connected all the cameras up, all the microphones up. We produced what we had with the equipment that was on site. And then we pushed into AWS for delivery, though, because we knew that we couldn't do it the typical way of using a satellite. And so we pushed all of those into AWS. Our partners at the time, if they had AWS, they didn't have AWS and they needed it in an HLS stream or an SRT stream, whatever that was, we can provide that to them easily within Media Connect through Media Live. Or if they didn't have either of those and they wanted something else, like, can you be the back end because we can't support all of that in our system, and they needed a CDN, that was also easy enough to spin up. And so that part was great. We've been using AWS from a delivery content for that. So what that means is that we produce 48 groups tee off every single Thursday. We had 48 live streams that were active on that Thursday. On Friday, another 48 groups would tee off. There was another 48 live streams. Saturday, Sunday, depending on the cut, there would be another say 35 streams. So in total, over 4 days, we would have about 166 live streams that were actually going on. And so after our deal with AWS and how much frustration we had from setting everything up on site, we decided to next year to move everything into AWS. And so what that meant was we pushed every single camera and every single microphone up into AWS. We had a tool that we use called Hawkeye. Hawkeye is known for VAR and soccer, but that's what we ended up using to produce those feeds. And so we spun up about a month before we spun up the Hawkeye instances, able to feed it from another tournament, did some testing, spun everything back down within a couple of days. And then we sent it, we spun it back up on a Monday. And our show was fairly straightforward and easy. It was pretty seamless being able to do it. Setup time was minimal. We didn't have to bring anybody in 4 days beforehand in order to set stuff up on site. And honestly, what we ended up doing was the media services that were there within AWS, since golf doesn't have lights. So an hour before sunrise, we spun everything up. An hour after sunset, we spun everything back down. And so that was fairly simple and easy to do from our team to be able to do it that way. Now in our third year of using AWS in that mode, and my team didn't even come to me this year because it went so flawlessly. We had no issues whatsoever. We would have international partners that would ask for the footage, say 2 weeks before. Can we actually take these streams? What's great about it is that it took our guy about an hour to be able to go ahead and actually create a file, the way they needed that set up for them. So, one of the main reasons that we actually did this is for our fans, right? And I said that we had 3% of all golf shots and then 10 and then say 28. We now wanted to provide them every single shot that was out there. So that was a driving force of doing what we did. But besides the live streams, the other thing that we actually do in that content is we also create every single shot gets clipped. And so we automate that process. So every single shot gets clipped. We have a product called Forecast. That Forecast product that we have is a graphical representation of the shots that occurred for the player on each hole. Now every single one of those shots also has a video. It's associated with that as well. And so as you're going through somebody's scorecard on our app, you'll also see the video shots that are there. The third thing that we do is something called speed round. So say it takes the players or the groups 5 hours to play that round. We have a rule set in place to automatically take every one of their shots as soon as they finish within 2 minutes. It's a 15-minute speed round of their day, of what they did. So we do provide that for our fans. The other thing that we ended up doing was we provided that for players themselves. So most of the stuff that we're doing this for is for our fans, but we also do it for our players. And so, example today, like Scotty Scheffler. So Scotty Scheffler last year in the playoffs, he went in and watched his round every single day after he played. He was one of the players that really wanted to see what he did, how he did stuff. So when he went back to the next day, he was able to do it.
That's awesome. I want to double click a little bit about the distribution component that you talked about there. I think what this enables too is to make a PGA Tour a tournament of utmost relevance to a particular market. So let's take an example like Hovland. God forbid, I don't think this would happen, that he's not on the leaderboard, but let's say he's not, but you've got a distributor or a would-be distributor in Scandinavia who really wants to, maybe following the entire leaderboard is not going to be as germane to their audience as actually being able to pull in and follow Hovland around the course as well. So how does that play in?
Yep. So that's a great point. So one of the things that we noticed, especially early on with this product, was that the U.S. market may focus on specific players, but they might be specific internationally to the hometown hero. And so Hovland is a good example. Hideki Matsuyama is a good example. There's a bunch of those that are examples of their hometown hero. And so some of those examples, those two in particular, they actually took the broadcast of our Every Shot Live piece of it. And it's not to the level and scale that we have, say, on a CBS or NBC. We don't even have announce on it. What they did is they took that feed and they put their own announcers on it. And so we were able to deliver that directly to them. And some of them, they would put it on their own linear channels and put their own announcers. And so what we did as we built out our shows for each one of those groups, there was a rundown on the left-hand side that said, let's go to an aerial shot. Then let's go back to the shots. Let's go ahead and do a graphic. And so they took those and they handed them off to their announcers, and they were able to announce based off of what it was that was coming up next. And so they knew when to lay out what they wanted to do with it. And so, the international personalization was huge. Some of them, like Sky UK, wanted to have some of their players, and so they would take, say, 4 or 5 of their players and integrate it into the show that they were creating. They wouldn't take the entire thing. They would just take individual pieces of each one of those as well. Now that we covered every single shot, they have the ability to kind of customize and create whatever they need for their hometown areas.
So just to make sure I understand this, the broadcasters, the commentary overlay, they're not there. They're not on site. They're back in.
They are not on site. So they were in Japan for Hideki. They were actually, in Scandinavia for Hovland. And so if I even take a step back when you mentioned it that way. So part of it also being in AWS, when I mentioned Hawkeye, which is what we use, the tool that we actually use to do all this, we have around 20 people that are in the London area, and another 20 that are in Atlanta. They log into our AWS instance, get assigned what group they are assigned to. They open that group up. This is my group for the day. I'm going to follow these guys for the next 4.5 hours as I go through it from hole to hole to hole to hole. So they're not on site. They are not in our facility. They are actually remoted out, and they all can log in and actually access it and create the show that way.
We have an architecture slide, I think. I don't know if there's anything in there you wanted to point to in this.
Yeah, so this gives you a really good example of kind of what it is if you guys know kind of the layout of it within AWS. And so on the left-hand side in the upper left is a box. That box really is the TV compound, which is at TPC Sawgrass. This is where was done. That box was probably 3/4 of the entire page the first year because we were on site. That's how much of equipment that we had. Over the last couple of years since we've been at AWS, that box has grown smaller and smaller and smaller. So really what you're seeing in that left-hand side is the AWS elemental encoders that we use to push all of our cameras directly up into AWS. And then from there, what it does is it goes into Media Connect, which is that first orange box that's in the middle section up there. Top area is really where our compute and storage is. Those are the EC2 instances that we spun up for Hawkeye so that we can actually have that come in. The far right-hand side, you'll see those. We have the Atlanta and the London operators that log into the system. That's what that is. But also we have TrackMan, which if you guys have seen golf at all, there's trace that goes on every shot. We had TrackMan also log in remotely so they can also help apply the trace to those shots as well. We did not have replay. We don't. We actually just do a rundown where we're going from graphic and other images that way. We likely will end up deploying that at some point in the near future as well. The other parts of it that you see down below are really the distribution piece of it, where you see Canal Plus and the ESPN Plus and those are kind of the distribution pieces of it. And then there's a kind of a green or a red triangle at the bottom, right, which is our media asset management system. So all of those, every single one of those goes directly into our MAM system as well. It gets auto tagged automatically. So since it's live, the ShotLink data that we have, ShotLink is our official scoring for all of our stuff. It covers every single shot. So when a player hits the ball, it automatically triggers it. We go back 2 seconds. When the ball comes to rest after it's hit, we go forward 3 seconds. We mark in, mark out, and then it automatically gets tagged into our system that way. We have around about 780 hours of content over those 4 days just for this one show. If you look at, say, a regular typical golf broadcast, if it's on air from 3 to 6, 4 straight days, we're talking 24 hours of golf. When it's a bigger show, you'll get up to 30, maybe 40 hours. Like the Masters this week is probably going to get closer to between 30 and 40 hours. This show itself is over 780 hours worth of content.
Started with the MAM, and then we just sort of came back to the MAM.
Back to the MAM. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about stuff that's going on. We've talked about what we've been working on. Let's talk about what you're doing right now. And especially, and you've got a photo of this too, I think, a new facility that you've built next to your headquarters at TPC Sawgrass, 165,000 square feet. Let's talk about what's in it. Let's talk about what's not in it and what you hope to do with it.
Sure. Yeah. Actually, before I go, I do want to say one other thing about the Every Shot Live.
Yeah.
Generative AI, we've been working quite a bit with the AWS team for that piece of it. I mentioned before that we do not have an ounce on it. One of the things that we're looking at is how can we actually leverage generative AI so that we can have, 48 groups playing off. That usually means you have 2 announcers. That's 96 announcers. We don't have that, right? How can we actually leverage that type of tool so that we can actually start putting an ounce on it? And so down the road, you'll you'll eventually end up seeing some of the stuff that we're working with AWS on to get to that point.
I love that. We're going to double click on that a little bit more too.
So the buildings. So on the left-hand side, you'll see a building. That one right there is what's called the Global Home. That actually opened in 2021. That is the PGA Tour's headquarters. On the right-hand side is our building, meaning the PGA Tour Studios building. We currently have a building over in St. Augustine called PGA Tour Entertainment. It is 35,000 square feet. This one is 165,000 square feet. We'll get into the details of that. If you look just north of that, there's a whole bunch of TV trucks. This is during Players Week, because if you see on the upper left-hand side, there's a whole bunch of different white little boxes. You can, if you really zoomed in on it, that's the TPC Sawgrass 17th hole, the Island Green. If anyone knows golf, that is one of the hardest golf holes in the world. Very short, but very challenging, because if you don't hit the green, you are in the water. So this gives you a kind of relative idea of where this is located within our TPC Sawgrass area. So building itself, as I mentioned, 165,000 square feet. It's very media centric. It's for all content creators at the PGA Tour. We will open with 8 control rooms and 7 studios. We will also house 4 audio post rooms, 4 video post rooms, 8 edit collaboration rooms, 6 advanced graphics rooms as well. There's going to be over 300 people that will have workstations in there, and another 28 offices that are in there as well. So anything that you see from us, we produce the PGA Tour Live product right now. We also produce PGA Tour Champions, which is our 50 and over. We also produce Korn Ferry Tour, which is our minor league. That's all going to be live produced out of that facility. So one of the things as we were designing it and building it was the rack space and how much rack space it would take. With our deal with AWS, we've realized a lot more of our stuff that we're doing, even on the live side, is going to be pushed to AWS. We eliminated 40 racks from our design because we felt we didn't need to have that many racks in there because of the stuff that we're doing in the AWS world.
What other flexibility does this facility give you, and what are some of the future-looking things that you're hoping to do out of there? Because I know that there's some like TBD space too, right?
Yeah. So on the TBD space, so when we went to go design this facility, what we decided to do was, if you look at our current building, we have TV trucks in our parking lot because we cannot actually handle all the production that we have currently. So when we built this one, we said we want to have between 20 and 25% growth built into the building itself. And so what we ended up doing was, there are 3 spaces altogether that equal about 17%. It's future unallocated. What it is, it's a white box with nothing around it at all. It's basically just, there's air conditioning that's in there, there's some power that's there, but we don't have anything out. It's all for future growth. And then what we ended up doing is, I mentioned there's 8 control rooms and 7 studios. We actually have walls built out for 13 control rooms and 12 studios. And the reason for that is because if we don't want to do construction, if we need to spin a show up pretty quickly into AWS or wherever we need to do with it and deliver it to our clients, it's already there. We just need to buy the equipment itself, or control surfaces, as well as the consoles and that. So we're about 24% future growth in that facility as well when we open up.
All right. So looking forward. So what we've done, what's actually in progress right now, what are some of your aspirations for future innovation for the tour? Leveraging cloud, leveraging technology. What's next on the list for you, Michael? I know it's a long list.
It is a long list, actually. I mean, kind of where we're going. I mean, I mentioned kind of the generative AI piece, and that's definitely part of where we are from the Every Shot Live piece. We're going to keep iterating a lot on the Every Shot Live, and you'll likely actually, what we want to do is we want to be able to provide to our fans, both domestically and internationally, more content, and they want to see live content as well. And so our hope and goal is to have that Every Shot Live at more events. We have now what's called signature events, and those signature events are ones that we are going to keep pushing and pushing to see if we can actually have more of that specialized content, especially for our fans. But also, I mean, for the home viewers internationally, because they want to see their own hometown heroes, we will see more of that going on forward. Right now, we're currently only doing that at one event, Players Championship, and our goal is to actually do that at more of those events. And honestly, there's so many different things that we've been talking through within that building of what we can do and how we can do it. Look, any of the hardware that you see in there now basically can also be spun up cloud-based as well. Control surfaces that we have can be pointed to the cloud. All of that stuff that we're building that way, the vendors that we've chosen for that, sure, some of it may be on-prem, but some of it will be cloud-based. You'll see more of the graphic stuff that we'll do. within AWS world. All of our ShotLink data is already in AWS. That's our scoring stuff. How do we leverage that to add more graphics material within our broadcast that we have, whether it be our shows, whether it be our partner shows, any of that stuff as well. There's a long list of stuff that we're working on and talking through.
And I think we've seen this alternate broadcast sort of emerge, right, throughout the industry and in other sports as well. I would imagine some of that data, you could have a much more analytical version of watching a tournament, in addition to the main broadcast, right?
Yeah. So something that we've tested out as well, it's called the ShotLink channel. If you've watched Bloomberg television before where you see a video, but there's all this data that's surrounding it, that's the same type of stuff that we've tested out as well, which is some people it's a little bit too much overload, but some people absolutely love it because they like to see the data and the statistics that are around it. So how do you actually get that video up there with a whole bunch of statistics that are around it? So that's stuff that we have been playing with as well.
And what that really gives is flexibility and an ability to meet a different kind of fan, right? Because there are the people who are the data junkies and really want to dive deep. And so that might not be for everybody, but to give that choice and to be able to serve that customer goes back to the mission of serving your fans, right?
Yeah, pretty much everything that we've been doing has basically been trying to serve our fans. As I mentioned, Every Shot Live also helps the players as well. Players have never had access to video afterwards. And so once we rolled that out, we were able to start providing them video. Even with the MAM side of things, we've had some announcers in the past before. We've had some caddies that have said, hey, can you show us I watched some of these tournaments from the past so I can actually, when I walk it next year or when I walk it this coming week, I actually know what to expect and I can see certain things. So it's given us the ability to be able to do that for any of those as well.
Great. We're going to leave a little time for Q&A, but I do want to go back to your Gen AI point because I know PGA Tour has been a leader in this space, and we're actually going to be having a conversation with your colleague Scott Gutterman tomorrow on the main stage about generative AI and its applications within sport and then more broadly. But let's talk a little bit about that use case that you mentioned because I love this one because, again, this is allowing you to serve fans in a way that you couldn't scale without it, right? So can you just talk a little bit more about that? You alluded to it, but let's go a little deeper in the commentary.
So the way I mentioned it was that, if we have 48 groups that are teeing off on a Thursday, we don't have 96 announcers. And so what we've been talking about is that, there are a lot of tools that are out there that you can say, all right, go ahead and actually announce based off of this data. But we don't want it to be just that. We want it to be more conversational. We want it to be where it says, oh, you know what? He hit it to 16 feet. Only 2 people have made it, made that putt from 16 feet. We need it to be that type of information. We can't just say he's 16 feet, 2 inches away from the hole, right? There is other things that are added to that. Besides, only 2 people have made it. This is an 80% chance of him making it based off of whatever else is done today. This is the 3rd hardest hole on the course. And if he gets it within this distance, there's this other stuff that you can take. Data is definitely a driver for it, but it needs to be more conversational. And that's where we're driving at. That's what we're trying to get to. We don't want to roll something out that people are just like, wow, this is not really that good. And so we want it to be more conversational piece so people can actually listen to it that way.
Context matters.
Context matters tremendously.
Right.
No question.
All right. So we'll stop for a second. Does anybody have any questions for Michael? Hold on. They're going to bring a microphone over. All right. I didn't even give you a heads up, David. Sorry.
Hello. Hi, Tony Durand. I'm a big golf fan, and I love what you're doing.
Yep.
To me, how you plan to localize and, do the translation on top of it. I can see how you do that with real announcers translating in real time. But are there any generative AI solutions you're considering to accomplish that same
We'll have to come see Scott tomorrow on our panel. But honestly, yeah, we do. We've been working with AWS quite a bit on this piece of it, specifically for the announce side of it, as well as for some of our translation piece as well.
I can jump in a little bit on this too, because we just, in March, Bundesliga had their sports innovation conference and we demonstrated with them, and it wasn't really even a translation. It was using data as sort of the starting point to create text commentary to overlay on broadcast. And we did that in 3 different languages. And then we're not just translating English because the colloquialisms in sport matter, right? So a straight translation wouldn't necessarily land in another language. So using the real colloquialisms and the terminology in that local market, we did that. And then further step was then, okay, let's do this in different personalities. Let's do a straight broadcaster view, like a Jim Nance sort of view, or they had one that they called the bro feed, and I imagine this is what fraternity boys talk like. Right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit like, whoa, sick goal, man. Right? So, I mean, so being able to infuse that, and that gets back to serving fans, in the manner that they want, right? The right language, the right tone. So generative AI can play a real place in that. Now, the one point I would caution you, and the thing I said specifically, is that we did this to commentary. So it was like a text commentary. Because in sport, and I think you're very well suited because you've got this sort of, the muted tones a little bit of golf that you can have that come through. But in the game of soccer, if you say goal, no, you got to scream goal, right? So you need to bring that emotion into it too. So we're sensitive of making sure that we're really, holding the ethos and the passion, before we roll something like that out. But that's in the future.
Well, thank you. I love what you're doing.
Awesome. Great. We have like 3 minutes. Any other questions? Yeah. Oh, hold on. David's coming.
More on that topic about using Gen AI for the announcement. Is your intention to replicate actual announcer's voice and train it based on their model, or will you tell the audience, by the way, this is the chatbot, whatever?
Initially, we will likely not have it be replication of somebody. We don't really own the rights to Jim Nance's voice, right? So there would have to be it'll take us a little time before we get to that point.
Everything has a price.
Yeah, it does. There's no question about it. Do I think we'll get there? Yes. Who and what voice will it be? We have an announcer on our team already that works for the tour. We call him the voice of the PGA Tour because he works for us. On Swantek is his name. You'll see him a lot on PGA Tour Champions and the ESPN Plus stuff. That would probably be the first one that you would see doing that, but I can definitely see us doing more and more of that really in the local market stuff as well, where we could have one voice that does all 48 groups. I don't know if that'll make sense as if they're moving between group and group and group, they're hearing the same thing, but we'll see. There's still a lot to work out through that one.
Thank you. All right. Oh, question. One last one. All right. We're getting a workout.
Check. Yeah. Hi, I'm Matt Azzardo, SA manager at AWS. Love what you guys are doing. It's super compelling. In that architecture diagram, I was just curious, you do branding, PGA branding of any of that content before it's outbound, and then thinking about the derivative feeds that you're creating, any automation that goes around creating those derivatives and how you would brand them or not brand them, give a clean feed versus a branded feed.
So I mentioned we have that 780 hours. It's double because we have a clean feed and we have a dirty feed. So clean feed means there's no graphics on any of it at all. So we archive everything with no graphics. We also have the one that goes out to the world, if you will. What we do within that one is actually we have, there's really a couple of different outputs. We have one that goes to ESPN here in the States. That one does have different somewhat branding that's on it. The other one that goes to the world actually is different than what goes to ESPN. So we actually do have two derivatives that are there just for one domestic, one international. And then we also have the third one, which is really the clean feed that goes into the archive. So we do archive both of those, the clean and dirty is on each one.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Thank you all for being here. Michael, thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Have a great show, everybody.